Good morning and welcome to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea Williams. Our focus this morning, it's on America's Black Holocaust Museum. For more than 20 years, the museum stood as a cultural cornerstone in Milwaukee's historic Black Bronzeville neighborhood. It was the late Dr. James Cameron who established America's Black Holocaust Museum back in 1988. And today, we'll remember Dr. Cameron and discuss the restoration of the museum. My guest is Mr. Reggie Jackson. He serves as the head griot of America's Black Holocaust Museum. He has a wealth of information about the history of the museum, its founder, and the future of America's Black Holocaust Museum. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm really excited. I'd like to start off finding out more about you. You first volunteered with America's Black Holocaust Museum about 16 years ago. What first drew you to the museum?
Well, I had actually met Dr. Cameron in 1994 when I first moved back to Milwaukee from California. And got a tour of the museum and sat with him for about 4 hours just talking, mostly listening. He was doing all the talking. And I knew at that moment that I was going to come back and assist him in some way. So in the summer of 2002, I had some time off from work. And that first day off, I went and volunteered at the museum, and they needed griots to give tours. And so I started the griot training program and became the Saturday griot at the museum for the next 6 years.
Yes, so if you would, for people who may not know, give the definition of a griot.
So griot is a term we used at the museum to describe the docents, the people that would give tours. And it comes from a tradition in West Africa, the French-speaking part of West Africa. They use the word griot to describe the oral historians, the people who are the keepers of the history of their community. So Dr. Cameron started a group called the Old World Griots many, many years ago, and he wanted all of the docents at the museum to be referred to as griots.
I love that. So Dr. James Cameron was truly a special person in so many different ways, and we'll talk about that during this half hour, but he dedicated his life to helping America realize its promise of liberty and justice for all. And I think it's safe to say he did not have an easy journey. Back in 1930, when he was just 16 years old, his life changed forever. So if you would, pick up there and tell us what happened that really was a traumatic experience, but really caused him to take on a mission and change the lives of many people.
Yeah, so at the age of 16, he was hanging out with some of his friends in Marion, Indiana, and they went for a ride in one of the guys' cars. And he was 16, the two other guys were 18 and 19. So as they were driving, they told him they were going to go out to this Lover's Lane area and rob somebody, which he was like, this was kind of, I don't really want to do this, but he felt the peer pressure. They drove out there and they said, we're just going to go up to the car and just say, stick them up. So here, take the gun, go up to the car, open the door, and just say, stick them up. He was very nervous, and he, had the gun in his hand shaking like this. He opened the door, and immediately he recognized a man in the car who was a good friend of his, Claude Dieter, who was in the car with his girlfriend, Mary Ball. And so he turned, he gave the gun to his friends, Abram Smith and Thomas Shipp, and he took off running as fast as he could to get away from the scene. And as he ran, he heard gunshots fired, and he hid in some bushes next to the road for a short period of time, and then he decided, I better get home, so he ran the rest of the way home. When he got home, he was just sweating profusely, and his mother said, what's going on? Why are you sweating like that? And he lied to his mother and said, well, I was out playing football with my friends. She knew he was lying, but she didn't know exactly what happened. So a farmer across the street from the Lover's Lane area heard the shots and came to Mr. Dieter's, rescue and took him to a doctor. He eventually died from the gunshots later, but he was able to identify who the three young men were before he passed away. So very quickly, the authorities in town came and found the three of them, arrested them, put them in the Grant County Jail right in downtown Marion. And the next day, a mob gathered around the jail, a mob of about 15,000 people. They basically demanded that the sheriff release the three young men. He refused to do so, and they eventually broke into the jail. They used sledgehammers and crowbars and broke all of the bricks around the door entering the jail. And so they went in and got each of the three, Abram Smith and Thomas Shipp. They murdered both of those, hung them on a tree, about a block and a half away in the center of the courtyard where the courthouse was. And then they went in to get 16-year-old James Cameron last. And so he talks about being in the cell with these black men who were riding the rails. At that time, during the Great Depression, a lot of people used to just jump on trains and go from city to city looking for work, so they had been arrested for that. And he says that these men tried to protect him and tell the mobsters who broke into the cell that he wasn't there. But they eventually, one of the men grew, very afraid because they threatened to kill all of them. And he pointed out, 16-year-old James Cameron. So they took him out. They took him out of the jail. They were beating him the entire time. They had a rope around his neck with the intention of hanging him right next to his two friends, Abe and Tommy. And he says as he's going through the crowd, he's seeing the faces of a lot of people he knows, people he considered to be friends. People are spitting on him, kicking him, punching him, a lot of different things. And so he says when he gets very near the tree and he sees his two friends, he looks and he says, this is the end for me. And he says he remembered his mother told him that in moments like that you just say a prayer and ask for forgiveness. And so he asked God for his forgiveness. And he said shortly thereafter he heard a very soft voice that said, "Leave this young man alone. He had nothing to do with these crimes," because at that point, a rumor had spread that not only had they murdered Claude Dieter, but that they had sexually assaulted Mary Ball as well, which never happened, but it didn't matter at that particular time. And so he says, when the crowd grew quiet and this voice spoke, he says they let him go.
Wow.
So he staggered back to the jail with this rope around his neck, and the sheriff whisked him off to another town for safekeeping. He was eventually tried as an accessory before the act of murder, found guilty, given a sentence of 4 to 21 years in prison, and he spent the next 4 years in prison in Indiana.
Wow. So, and it's so important to lay out that whole storyline because it really did shape who he ended up being for the rest of his life.
Right.
I was telling you before the show that I had the opportunity to interview Dr. Cameron on so many different occasions in the early 90s, and there was a big flood that affected our TV station back in 2010 or so, and all of those interviews have been ruined, but it was so important for me to get him on tape telling that story. But one thing I'll remember, he always got emotional every single time he told the story, which lets you know how traumatic it was. And then I always remembered him referring to white people who always looked out or were trying to protect as freedom-loving white people.
Oh, yeah.
So those are great memories of just really the great man that he ended up being. And so here we are looking at you meeting Dr. Cameron, and you end up working at the museum. And so I'm interested in knowing how Dr. Cameron ended up in Milwaukee.
Well, Dr. Cameron, so after he got out of prison, he was forced to leave the state of Indiana. He had to move to Michigan, and he stayed with his sister for a while. He eventually came back to Indiana, and he became a civil rights activist in Indiana. So he worked for civil liberties in Indiana. He opened up either 3 or 4 branches of the NAACP in Indiana, which was exceptionally difficult because at that particular time, 1920s, 1930s, the state of Indiana had more Ku Klux Klan members than any other state.
Wow.
So he was literally risking his life by doing this work. He had met his wife Virginia. They had married and started a family, and they got consistent death threats on a daily basis. And so after receiving so many death threats and having a very difficult time convincing blacks to join the NAACP, he became very frustrated, and he decided to actually leave the country. He was going to move to Canada with the family, and so he came back through his home state. He was born in La Crosse in 1914, and they stopped in Milwaukee. And at that particular time, the Bronzeville neighborhood was a thriving community. The Black Business District was doing exceptionally well at that particular time, and he kind of fell in love with the city of Milwaukee and decided to make it his home for the rest of his life.
And the rest, as they say, is truly history. So let's talk about the establishment of America's Black Holocaust Museum. I remember Dr. Cameron saying it was after a trip to Jerusalem, and he really respected the history of the Jewish population and how they always, educated themselves about their history, made sure others understood it, and he wanted to do the same thing for African Americans, considering that their experiences with slavery and the Holocaust was so similar in the ways of just a race of people being tortured simply because of the way they look or who they were. So let's talk about how he ended up opening up America's Black Holocaust Museum.
Well, Dr. Cameron converted to Catholicism, and so he was a very strict Catholic, and he went on a pilgrimage with his church. In 1979, he and his wife Virginia went to Jerusalem with the group, and when they were there, they visited Yad Vashem, which is the Jewish Holocaust Memorial. And they were touring this facility for several hours, seeing, the atrocities that the Jewish people throughout Europe endured during the Holocaust. And he says at the end of the tour of Yad Vashem, you finish in a garden. And at that time, the garden was called the Garden of the Righteous Gentiles. It was a garden dedicated to the memory of all of those people who assisted Jewish individuals and families escaping the Nazis. And so they had, this memorial to all of these people. And so he says that as they're standing there, he turned to Virginia. He said, Virginia, they're both in tears by now because of how horrific the journey was. He said, we need a museum like this in America to tell what happened to blacks and those freedom-loving whites who assisted blacks during their struggles.
Yeah.
And that was the motivation for starting the museum and giving it the name that he gave it.
Yes, indeed. And so he strategically opened the Black Holocaust Museum on Juneteenth, which is another historic day and another whole history lesson. But from that point on, he was able to bring in some extraordinary exhibits to educate us all. I remember Slave Ship Speaks, the wreck of the Henrietta Marie, and that really gave you a feel for what it was like to be on that voyage, not knowing where you were going, pretty much being planked on top of each other, people being sick, no food, no water, whatever the case. And you could hear the sounds of the ship creaking and people moaning. And it was really something that was pretty amazing to see, and you guys at the museum went through a lot to bring that to Milwaukee.
Absolutely. That was the Black Holocaust Museum was actually the first stop that tour made as it was traveling around the world. And so when they came to the museum, the space wasn't large enough. They actually had to make the museum space bigger to fit the exhibit. And one of the things that they built inside the museum was the simulated slaving ship. And so when that exhibit eventually left after being there for a while, they couldn't take the ship with them. It was built a permanent fixture inside of the building. Wow. So that became a permanent part of America's Black Holocaust Museum. And I remember giving tours, and that would always be the most emotional part of the beginning of the tour, is to take the groups inside of the ship. What I tried to do was to give people an idea of what it was like on those ships. And I would always say, well, we can't simulate the heat or the smell, but we can at least teach you what it's like to not have any personal space. And so whether I had a group of 2 people or a group of 250 people, I tried to jam people in there as closely as possible so that they get the experience, and then tell them some of the stories of the Middle Passage, because those are things that we don't typically learn in our history classes.
That's
and
true.
It became a really important part. So actually when they were tearing down the old building last year, we actually were able to get the crew who was demolishing the building to disassemble the ship for us and save it, and it's been in storage, and it'll be in the new space when the new museum opens.
Now that is a tearjerker right there. So thank you so much for sharing all the information up to this point. I want you to stay close because, of course, we're going to continue this conversation about Dr. James Cameron and the Black Holocaust Museum. We're going to take a quick break and continue our conversation with Mr. Reggie Jackson right after this.